So, Volume 3 of RWBY shook up the foundation of the entire show. One of our main characters, one of the most beloved characters, actually died. The villains won, and Pyrrha's story ended then and there. Suddenly, there were real stakes for her characters in the show. No one was safe. But you know what? I think it should have been Jaune instead. You know, Jaune. That one blonde kid who always gets to be center screen. Jaune. The one who manages to steal screen time away from Team RWBY regularly. The 5th main character of the show. Good ol' Jaune. Honestly though, I'm just kidding. I do like Jaune conceptually, but he does have the nasty habit of being a bit of a scene hog. So I understand there's probably a good handful of people who clicked on this video just because the idea of scrubbing this character out of the show sooner would have been a positive for them. I get it, honestly. When this thought first crossed my mind, I'll admit, it was just because I was annoyed with his character. But the more I sat on the idea, the more I realized it actually could have been a better turn of events for the show in the long run. Now, I'm not the only one who's had this idea before. This is actually a pretty common AU idea in the RWBY fandom. I know You All Right has a whole series going into finer details about this kind of AU. I haven't watched those vids because I knew I wanted to make this video and I didn't want to accidentally steal any of their ideas. And I'm excited once I finish this vid, I can finally watch all of You All Right's vids on the topic. Hooray! For now though, it's time for me to lay out all the reasons I think Jaune should have died instead of Pyrrha.
I'm Jaune.
RWBY.
So, let's be honest. Pyrrha was not RWBY's friend. In all 3 volumes Pyrrha was alive for, there's only 2 moments where they actually spoke to each other. In Forever Fall, when Pyrrha explained semblances, and at the noodle shop of the tournament, when Pyrrha paid for their food. Let's be real, the chemistry between Pyrrha and RWBY wasn't exactly noteworthy. In those moments, quite honestly, the 2 girls didn't even talk to each other. They just happened to be in the same scene for once. So the idea that seeing Pyrrha's death was the great big thing that activated RWBY's silver eyes doesn't really hold up. Especially considering she was a lot closer to Penny. RWBY and Penny spent tons of time together. Penny trusted RWBY with her big secret of being a robot. The 2 girls were very clearly close, but Penny's death isn't the thing that makes RWBY's eyes light up. Pyrrha is. You know, that girl who literally only once said RWBY's name.
RWBY,
Yeah, she's apparently the reason RWBY's eyes start to glow. There's not many characters who seem like they were closer to RWBY than Penny, but Jaune actually is one of them. RWBY and Jaune has a great friendship. He was her first friend ever in Beacon. When everyone else abandoned her, there was Jaune to help pick her back up. When RWBY was worried she wouldn't be able to find Yang in the forest, Jaune was the first alternative she thought of. RWBY and Jaune consistently spent time talking to each other one-on-one all throughout the first 3 volumes. I would believe that RWBY's eyes would activate over Jaune's death. The 2 have just spent much more screen time together. And on that note,
let me help you.
I don't want help. I don't want to be the damsel in distress. I want to be the hero.
it's like I was saying before, Jaune is often center screen. This has been a consistent thing since the very beginning of the show, with the infamous Jaune arc in the middle of Volume 1. Our focus shifts away from any of the Team RWBY girls to only be about Jaune, and it doesn't end there. Volume 2's dance arc might initially seem like it's a story about Pyrrha, but no. Yeah, she gets to talk a lot about her life as a pseudo-celebrity, but in reality, it's all just in service to develop Jaune more. Jaune's the character who actually develops in this moment, being conflicted about Neptune asking out Weiss, having 2 different one-on-ones with Pyrrha and Neptune, wearing a dress for Pyrrha, encouraging Neptune to make things better with Weiss. Jaune is clearly still the important one in the middle of all of these shenanigans. A lot of people get annoyed by how much screen time is dedicated towards Jaune in the early volumes, but if he had actually died in Volume 3's finale, I think it would have made a lot more sense. We've spent all this time establishing this character, you know how much he's grown and changed in such a short amount of time. Seeing his untimely death would have hurt a lot more. Let's be honest with ourselves. We only think Pyrrha's death is sad sad because we like the idea of her character. She barely gets any screen time, finally getting to really get a bit of development and deeper personality during Volume 3, but her death doesn't hurt because we all really liked her character, it hurts because we all really liked our headcanons of this character. Even if you really don't like Jaune in Volumes 1 through 3, you can at least admit that he had some well-defined personality, and it's because he was always pushed center screen for all these various plotlines centering around him. And I'll be honest, his death would just naturally be more sad, because he never really got to achieve any of his goals. Jaune is introduced to us with clear limitations to his character. He has a crappy hand-me-down weapon, not a super cool, specifically designed one like all the other students. He doesn't have a semblance yet. He has a crush on Weiss, who wants to be a hero. Having his story end tragically before any of those ideals could have come true would be really sad and painful. Lost with still so much potential. Both us, the audience, and the characters in-universe would just sit there and wonder to ourselves, if he got the chance, I wonder what his semblance could have been. But we'll never know. It would be Jaune's last moment, his final hurrah to prove he really is a hero like how he always wanted, and maybe, for a moment, you might even think he could really do it. You'd be watching him charging in to fight Cinder, rolling your eyes because you assume this is another moment where Jaune steals screen time away from the heroes. Just like in Forever Fall Forest, just like with the Grim Invasion in Volume 2. Another moment where Jaune is propped up to be a special hero, except this time, he doesn't win. Ruby's just too late, and we watch one of her closest friends die. He never got to make his own weapon with her. He never got to unlock his semblance. He only gets to be a hero in death. It's unfair, isn't it? Now, having Pyrrha be the one who dies did do a good job establishing the threat level the villains possess. Pyrrha is the strongest fighter in the heroes team by a mile, so having Cinder best her proves that the heroes need to really step up their game if they want to stand a chance against them. A great idea in concept, two problems though. One, they had already done a fine job establishing how powerful the villains are without Pyrrha's death. They took over Ironwood's entire robot army in seconds and summoned a gigantic dragon to destroy the school. Two, this win feels kind of hollow in hindsight when you see just how often Cinder loses after this. This one perk of having it be Pyrrha really doesn't compare to how much Jaune's death would impact the characters personally. Well, I guess there was one other thing. Pyrrha's crush on Jaune. Pyrrha was head over heels for that boy since the beginning, and she died before anything could come of it, and that is sad. But also, he didn't even know she had a crush on him, not until the very last second when she kisses him. And a lot of people say Jaune's so angry at Cinder because of this crush. But don't kid yourself. Jaune never showed any romantic feelings towards Pyrrha. It was always about Weiss. With Pyrrha's death, it's a sad notion in hindsight, but it kind of just ends there. If Jaune died, we'd have Weiss, who would be in a similar boat that Jaune is in canon right now, knowing retroactively that someone who died had a crush on them. But more importantly, Pyrrha would still be alive. See, that's another big part of the fun with this scenario. Not just the idea of Jaune dying early, but also Pyrrha living longer. Her feelings wouldn't just go away. Imagine Pyrrha in the woods in Volume 4, training by herself, watching a video of her and Jaune trying to coordinate their moves. And she starts to try to tell Jaune something in the video, but chickens out and doesn't admit her feelings. Imagine the regret she would have, having to watch that part of that video, wishing in hindsight she should have just told him her feelings before he was gone. Not only does that sound like powerful emotional development for Pyrrha as a character, but also, now the crazy grudge with Cinder makes a lot more sense. Jaune crying and screaming feels very overdramatic, especially compared to every other character not having nearly as big of a meltdown as he's having. This feels rather extreme for a guy who didn't even think of this girl as more than a friend. But if this was Pyrrha, I think it would make way more sense to see her screaming and crying. Her crush on Jaune was the biggest thing for her character for the majority of her screen time. Of course course she'd be going into a frenzy seeing Cinder again, not only because of Jaune's death, but also that's the girl who stole her maiden powers. Don't you think Pyrrha would want to claim her rightful place as the Fall Maiden? Try and beat Cinder to get what was promised to her? It makes way more sense for Pyrrha to be throwing herself at Cinder at the drop of a hat. When Jaune does it, it just once again feels like he's getting special treatment. And while we're on the topic of maidens,
then I will become your Fall Maiden.
Pyrrha was the only character who got to learn about maidens. Then she died, and it was a weird setback for all of the characters. We had to wait for RWBY to eventually get caught up on the information we, the audience, had known for about a half a volume ago. It makes the story feel kind of repetitive, having the kids sit around and play catch-up with the audience. Now, if Pyrrha lived, there could be two interesting ways the story could go about this. First, Pyrrha tells everyone about the maiden stuff. After the fall of Beacon, Pyrrha tells RWBY, Ren, and Nora about Ozpin's secret council, and the truth about real magic. Not only would it keep everyone in the main cast up to speed, but also this could be an easy motivation for the characters. In the real show, the squad head to Haven Academy because Cinder's team claimed to come from there. They go to get information about her, but once they get there, they never really look into things about Cinder or her team, making that whole motivation kind of feel pointless in the long run. But if the squad had known about maidens and stuff, their motivation about going to Haven could have been about continuing to help protect the maidens. That's what ends up being their ultimate goal in the end with Haven anyways. Or we have that second option. Pyrrha keeps it a secret from her friends. There's big themes about keeping secrets from others in RWBY, especially with Ozpin and his council. Yang is very much opposed to Ozpin because of his lies and half-truths. What if Pyrrha got to play devil's advocate and side with Ozpin, also keeping her own lies and half-truths? Or perhaps she thinks this is her burden. Roping Jaune into this mess is what got him killed. Maybe she'd be afraid to tell the others. Either way, eventually Crow would reveal the truth about relics, and maybe that would shake up Pyrrha's perception about this whole thing. There's more to this that she didn't even know about yet. They were trying to recruit her to be a maiden and didn't even tell her about the relics. Not only could any of this be an interesting direction for the character development, but it also would have helped alleviate that feeling that the writers are just randomly adding onto their lore. Relics, as they are now, kind of just feel like extra add-ons to their story. They thought of maidens, needed a reason for maidens to exist, and then threw the relics in to be that excuse. If they leaned into this idea of who's keeping secrets, how many secrets are there, how much have they not revealed yet, it would feel a lot more like calculated revelations from the older characters in charge, rather than just feeling like last-minute retcons.
Jaune and I are the only two living away from home. I guess he just wanted to be like his big sis.
Any discussion on the bigger roles Pyrrha would play from being alive instead of Jaune throughout the rest of the series would end up just being headcanon/AU rewrite territory. A very fun concept, but not what I'm here to really talk about. But if you have interesting ideas on how different story beats would change with Pyrrha's inclusion instead of Jaune, I'd love to see them in the comments below. But no, the last point I want to make is related to that terrible giant Pyrrha statue. Clearly, this whole scene only exists to try to make the audience a big ol' remembrance to Pyrrha, punctuated with this woman, Mystery Woman as she's officially credited as. She is very, very implied to be related to Pyrrha. Her mother, maybe, an aunt, sister, I don't know. This is cheap, and I hate it because it comes out of nowhere. Ironically, Pyrrha is one of the very few characters who never talked about her home life before the fall of Beacon. But Jaune has discussed the fact that he has 7 sisters back in Volume 2. If RT really wanted to have a character show up and be a sad reminder of their dead friend, it could have very easily been any one of the 7 sisters they had already established. In fact, they could have had it where we continually run into an ARC sister to be a grim reminder of Jaune's death. I don't like Mystery Woman because she's unexplained and comes out of nowhere, but also, having her be thrown randomly into existence with this one scene feels very cheap. A cheap, lazy way to make the audience and Jaune cry. With the previously established ARC sisters, the heroes could have been running into them, and not only would it have been better established, but also it would feel more natural to the flow of the storytelling, because we've already set this up. To dive into rewrite territory a little bit, let's picture this. Volume 4. Yang is going through her depression when there's suddenly a knock on the door, and is suddenly face to face with someone who looks almost exactly like Jaune. It's one of his sisters, and she's here to give RWBY and Yang some mementos. Jaune wrote home often, and she's trying to give the important people in his life keepsakes to remember him by. RWBY's obviously not here at the time, but Yang accepts the offer. The woman notices Yang's arm and reveals she's actually a mechanic, and after talking to Yang about the fall of Beacon, she says she'd be willing to custom build Yang a new arm, making Yang's new arm feel a bit more personal than Ironwood's random gift. Volume 5, and RWBY and the gang run into another ARC sister in Haven. The team is obviously rattled by seeing the similar looking relative, but they all put on a big, brave face. Except for Pyrrha, who excuses herself and has to leave the conversation entirely. Volume 6, after revelations about Ozpin lies, Pyrrha storms off and finds a memorial to the fallen from Beacon, and there she runs into Saffron. Here, rather than running from her emotions, Pyrrha talks to Saffron and finds some comfort in her words. Ren and Nora would then find Pyrrha afterwards, and they would have a big heart-to-heart, just like how Jaune has in the original. You know, just having regular moments where the audience and the characters can feel the impact Jaune had on their lives, using his 7 sisters as fuel to further develop them all. Honestly, I'm amazed the ARC sisters don't play a bigger role in the story. Even in the real show, there's 7 sisters. He brings that up in Volume 2, and I thought for sure we'd meet way more of them by now. But anyways, that's all just my ideas. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and what other AU scenarios do you think would have worked instead? Both Jaune and Pyrrha live? They both die? I don't know. I love this kind of stuff. So any and all thoughts you have, leave them in the comments below. Shout out to my $10 patrons. You're all amazing. Andrew, Valhalla Knight, Chamomile, Classy Critic, Noah Perkins, Sunny Shy, Genital War Thunder, Jake, Amber, Hype Man, Isaiah, Scaring Crows, Not All That Evil, Messiah Complex, Jacob, Ben's Sketchbook, Rain, Omega Fighter, Trash, Wild Pilot, Josh, Twisty, Juan, Bunkin Duncan, Lycan99, Hoodie Angel, Ranger, and Hut Mutt Butt. I hope you had fun with this one. This is one that I've been sitting on for a while. I've had this thought in my head for years now, so it's so nice to finally get it out there, get it all just said and done and well articulated. What do you think about any of the stuff I said? Do you agree or disagree? And like I said, any AU concepts you have, I love. I think it's the most fun thing ever. Any and all thoughts and opinions, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to see them, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.